श्री श्री राधा गोपीनाथ भगवान की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे। हरि हरि बोल। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to today's Bhagavatam class. Today we are in Canto 2, Chapter 10. Srimad Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. And verse 14. Aditaivam adhyatmam. Aditaivam adhyatmam atadhyatmam. Adidaivam atadhyatmam. Adibhutam iti Prabhu. Adibhutam iti Prabhu. Ataikam purusham viryam. Ataikam purusham viryam. Trida vidyata tachrunu. Trida vidyata tachrunu. Adidevam atadhyatmam. Adibhutam iti Prabhu. Ataikam purusham viryam. Trida vidyata tachrunu. Adidevam atadhyatmam. Adibhutam iti Prabhu. Ataikam purusham viryam. Trida vidyata tachrunu. Adidaivam, the controlling entities. Ata, now. Adhyatmam, the controlled entities. Adibhutam, the material bodies. Iti, thus. Prabhu, the Lord. Ata, in this way. Ekam, one only. Purusham, of his lordship. Viryam, potency. Trida, in three. Abhidyata, divided. Tat, that. Shrunu, just hear from me. Translation: just hear from me how the potency of his lordship divides one into three, called the controlling deities, the controlled entities, and the material bodies in the manner mentioned above. Since this doesn't have the purports, let's go to the further verses. Verse 15. Antasarira akashat purushasya vichestata ojasaho balam jajne tataprano mahanasu. From the sky situated within the transcendental body of the manifesting Mahavishnu, sense energy, mental force and bodily strength are all generated, as well as the sum total of the fountainhead of the total living force. Text 16. Anuprananti yam prana pranantam sarva jantusu apanantam apananti naradevam ivanuga. As the followers of a king follow their lord, similarly, when the total energy is in motion, all other living entities move, and when the total energy stops endeavoring, all other living entities stop sensual activities. purport by Srila Prabhupada. The living entities, the individual living entities are completely dependent on the total energy of the Supreme Purusha. No one has independent existence, just as no electric lamp has independent effulgence. Each and every electrical instruments depend fully on the total powerhouse. The total powerhouse depends on the reservoir of water for generating electricity. Water depends on the cloud. The cloud depends on the sun. The sun depends on creation, and the creation depends on the movement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of all causes. Let's recite Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanatimrandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stabitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurum Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahana Raghunantanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Savatutam Parijana Sagitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I humbly request the blessings of the devotees so that I'll be able to serve Srimad Bhagavatam through my thoughts, words and deeds. To have a summary of this chapter, is titled Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions, which Sukadeva Goswami describes in the first verse itself that the 10 topics which is spoken by Srimad Bhagavatam, which is Atra Sarga Visargascha Sthanam Poshanam Uteha Manvantara Isanukada Nirodha Mukti Ashrayaha. And this whole chapter explains the Sarga, which is the creation or the primary creation done by the Supreme Lord. And just by understanding this chapter alone, one can understand the process of creation. But just by carefully analyzing and understanding this whole chapter of second canto, one can understand the process of primary creation. And previously we have seen how the Mahavishnu lying in the Kaushal Ocean, just by breathing in, breathing out, he is creating and destroying, he is creating innumerable universes while he is breathing out. And after creating innumerable Brahmandas, he enters into each and every Brahmandas by expanding into Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. And he again, after entering into each universes, he lies down into the Garbhodaka ocean as the super soul of each Brahmanda. As we know, Mahavishnu is the super soul of the whole cosmic manifestation, whereas Garbhodaka Vishnu is the super soul of all the Brahmandas, each and every Brahmanda. And Kshirodakasaya Vishnu is the super soul of all the individual living entities. And then verse 14, which describes Let me read the translation. Just hear from me how the potency of his lordships divides one into three called the controlling entities, the controlled entities, and the material bodies. Here previously in the 13th verse, the Lord generated the seminal symbol, which is in the form of a golden hue, and this seminal symbol is now initially one. Now it's divided into three different energies of the Lord, and which is called as the controlled entities, which is the demigods, and the controlling living entities, which is the demigods, and the controlled entities, which is the living entities, the jivas, and the material bodies, which is the gross material bodies. And the next translation is, next verse is, from the sky situated within the transcendental body of the manifesting Mahavishnu, sense energy, mental force, and bodily strength are generated. So to perform any activity, we need energy. Like without having energy in our body, we can't even perform any activity. Now here we see that for the whole cosmic creation to act, to perform any, to get into motion, the Supreme Lord generates the energy from his own self. And it is mentioned that from the sky situated within the transcendental body of the manifesting Mahavishnu, which here state that what is situated in the body of the Mahavishnu is one of the ingredient which is present in the body of Mahavishnu is the sky. It is each ether, and from that ether, the Lord is manifesting the energy for the material universe to get into motion. And then followed by this next verse, which is there are three different energies: the energy for the senses, energy for the mind, and the energy for the gross material body, which is generated. Then the following verse describes, as the followers of the king follow the Lord. Similarly, when the total energy is in motion, all other living entities move, and when the total energy stops endeavoring, all other living entities stop sensual activities. So, if the energies, when the energies act, the living entity also acts, which means the living entity is completely dependent on the energy which is generated by the Supreme Lord, which describes the fact that the living entities cannot act on their own; they are completely fully dependent on the energy or empowerment of the Supreme Lord. And here Prabhupada gives a beautiful analogy, like how the different creations of the living entities, for example, the electric lamp, and similarly any other electronic device to act, we need electricity, and how the electricity is generated through the creation, which was the created energies of the Supreme Lord, like how, be it solar energy or wind, like electricity generated to three different sources, generally like solar energy or windmill, or using the turbines, which is used to rotate using the flow of water in the dams. So ultimately, to generate electricity, the human beings depends on the source of energy which is created by the Supreme Lord. And in this way, the living entity is not completely independent. It is the living entity is always dependent, and for any creation to happen. But the Supreme Lord, let's take, there are two different creations. The Supreme Lord also creates, but the living entity also perform the creation within the material world. But we can see that the Supreme Lord does not depends on anybody. But similarly, but the living entity has to depend on somebody else to create a creation. For example, we can take a mother also want to create a child. The mother has to depend upon the father to become impregnated. So she cannot become pregnant on her own. And then after getting impregnated, she has to wait for some time. It is not that she can instantly beget a child. She has to take 9 months during her pregnancy for the child to get matured. And after this, the mother has to go through the process of hard work, hardship, the labor of childbirth to give birth to a child. And also to maintain herself, she has to consume food regularly. And after giving birth to the child, out of childbirth, due to heavy labor, the mother loses the energy which she had. After because of the creation, she has to lose the energy which she previously possessed. And apart from this, the mother also has to, for any activity which we do in this world, also involves a certain amount of karma which binds us to the cycle of repeated birth and death. So for any creative activity which a living entity performs in this world, it involves 5 different things. Like the living entity has to accept 5 different things, which is the living entity has to depend on other living entity to do the creation, and the living entity has to work hard to perform the creation. Whereas, and also the living entity takes certain amount of time to create the creation, and the living entity also has to lose his energy which he or she possessed, and also while in the course of performing that activity, the living entity accepts certain karmic bondage which binds the living entity to the cycle of repeated birth and death. But interestingly, if we see the Supreme Lord here, he is also creating. He doesn't have to work very hard to create the cosmic manifestation. Comparatively, in comparison, the creation which is done by the Lord is almost inconceivable than the creation which we are doing. And also, the Supreme Lord does not depend on anybody else's help to create a creation. He himself generates the ingredients for the source of the creation also, and he doesn't take so much time just by breathing in, breathing out, according to his time duration. Within the breathing in, he destroys innumerable universes, and also while breathing out, he creates innumerable universes. So he doesn't have to wait for a prolonged period of time to do the creation. And also we see that the Supreme Lord does not lose his energy, as we see in the invocation of Isha Upanishad, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. The Supreme Lord is is perfect and complete, and so many perfectly complete units emanate from him, and even after producing so many complete units, the Supreme Lord still remains complete. That it defines the transcendental potency of the Supreme Lord. Even after creating the creation, the Supreme Lord does not lose any energy, and he still remains complete. And after creating the creation, he performs his activity as Krishna says, Janma karma chame divyam, yevam yo viti tattvatva tyaktva deham punajanma na iti mameti so Arjuna. So, Janma karma chame divyam, my activities in this world are so transcendental, and when I perform any activity, and a living entity understands this activity of mine, he will get liberated from the cycle of birth and death. That's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita also. That the pastime of the Lord, to create the cosmic manifestation, is also a type of activities, one of the pastimes of the Lord. And when a living entity understands this activity of the Lord, but just by understanding, one get liberated from the cycle of birth and death. This is the benediction which Lord himself says for the living entity. But when we see that when the living entity does a creation, he not only goes through so much hardship, he also binds himself to the cycle of birth and death. That is which is completely opposite than the results what the Supreme Lord does. And to perform any activity, the Supreme Lord is not forced to do any performance activity. He just chooses to do the creation. He was not forced by the material nature to do the creation. Rather, he himself creates the material nature, and without being any force. It's just a choice. Whereas the living entity, he was forced to do any creation. For example, the living entities accept a material body, and in order to maintain their body in a peaceful condition, the living entity has to build a house to maintain himself. So, as Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita, like Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasaha ahankara vimudatma karta aham iti manyate, which is stated the living entity is being forced. Here the Lord clearly states that the living entity is forced to perform any activity within this material world. And how the living entity is forced? It is forced by the material nature. It is not that the living entity is like cannot perform any activity on its own. Yesterday I was listening to His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj's lecture on this verses, and he was explaining that the living entity cannot even do any single activity on its own. Just like the Supreme Lord, like in further verses, we will understand that for each and every activity, there is a particular demigod, there is a particular controlling deity for each and every limbs of our body. For example, we have a demigod for blinking of our eyelids. So without we don't even know like how these things are happening, but the Supreme Lord has the remote control in His hand, and the remote is the demigods. With the help of the demigods, the Supreme Lord is like indirectly controlling or empowering the living entity to perform any material activity. However, this is for an ordinary conditioned souls. But what about the surrendered souls? The surrendered souls has a it doesn't mean that the living entity, like once it is surrendered, he does not perform any activity. There comes the concept of devotional service. As soon as one ordinary jiva understands that he is a conditioned living entity and he is going through the cycle of birth and death, and everything he does is controlled by the three modes of material nature, he takes to the shelter of Krishna by the association of devotees. And as soon as devotee takes shelter and he completely 100% surrenders to Krishna, two things happens to the living entity. One is when the karma of the living entity is destroyed, and the next thing is the living entity is empowered to perform so many wonderful activities. And in this connection, Maharaj denotes that the living, like how Hanuman was able to perform a wonderful activity in Ramayana, like he was able to carry a mountain. Have anyone have heard that, like a monkey lifting a mountain? Yes, of course we know, like Krishna lifted a mountain, and held it in his pinky fingers for 7 years, 7 days. But here the Lord empowered his devotee to perform even more wonderful activity. He is not only lifting the mountain, he is also carrying the mountain across the ocean, like, and then he is serving in order to serve the Lord. How does it happen? It is because of the empowerment of the Supreme Lord. It is not that the living entity like was forced to do devotional service. The living entity wants to do devotional service, which means Hanuman he was never forced by Lord Ram to like lift the mountain and bring the mountain there. Hanuman decided, let me the incident goes like this, like Lakshman was attacked by a Shakti weapon and he becomes unconscious and he was about to die if he was, and the only way which he can be cured is by bringing the certain specific herb called Vishala, which is located in the Gandhamadana mountains of India. And Lord, looking at this, at the condition of Lakshman, Hanuman desires, let me go and bring the herb for Lakshman so that he can get cured. And Lord Ram understands the desire of Hanuman, and he sends Hanuman to the Hanuman to bring the herb. And there Hanuman goes there and trying to find the herb, but due to this, but he doesn't know which herb is the herb which is a normal plant. He don't know how to discriminate what is a herb, what is a normal plant. So he only have a very short period of time. He cannot go back and confirm whether this is the plant or not. So he thinks, at least the best thing I can do at this point of time is I can lift the mountain, so I can transplant the entire mountain to a different to Lanka, so that they can choose the herb by themselves. So in this way, Hanuman thinks, okay, let me lift the mountain, and the Supreme Lord empowered him to lift the whole mountain and transplant it in Sri Lanka. So when the living entity performs devotional service, it is not empowered by the external energy of the Lord. Rather, the living entity is empowered by the internal energy of the Supreme Lord, which is the Yoga Maya potency of the Lord. And when the living entity performs devotional service, it does not produce any karma. Rather, it destroys the karma of the previous karma of the living entity, and enables the living entity to progress further in the to liberate from the cycle of birth and death. Yeah. And even after surrendering to Krishna, the living entity is completely dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Lord to perform the wonderful activity. It is not that after surrendering to Krishna, Krishna is being forced by the living entity to empower him. Krishna empowers the living entity according to, out of being very pleased by his own by the attitude of the devotee. Krishna empowers him so that the devotee will be able to perform so many wonderful activities. So even after surrendering to Krishna, the living entity is completely dependent. The devotee is completely dependent of the mercy of the Supreme Lord to perform wonderful activities, to execute his devotional service perfectly for the pleasure of the Lord. So, yeah, that is the understanding. That is the understanding so far, which I have according to this verse. Have any comments? Yeah.
How do you understand these pastimes arranged by the Supreme Lord, that some Pure Bhagavatam to the superior glory of Bhagavatam are being spoken in? The Lakshman could have also just like Bhagavatam, they could have just recited Bhagavatam. How do we understand that?
So the question here is to listen Bhagavatam, there is a different case where he was cursed to death. Here Lakshman was already unconscious, there is no possibility. And here it's a two different lila, two different pastimes of the Lord, Lord's devotees. And each and every devotee has a unique relationship, just like each and every devotee has a unique relationship with Krishna, as we understand according to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. Similarly, each and every living entity has his own unique service to Krishna. So the service of Parikshit Maharaj at that point of time when he was cursed is to act as an instrument to speak, to bring Srimad Bhagavatam to the world. Whereas the first time which happened to Hanuman was to glorify Hanuman, how a devotee who is a faithful servant of Krishna, faithful servant can perform most wonderful activity to assist the Lord in his mission. So that there in the pastime of Lord Ram, the mission of the devotee is to protect the Lord, whereas in the pastime of Parikshit Maharaj, the mission of the Lord is to come back in the age of Kali Yuga to in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. So devotee does not act on his own. He just want to act according to the will of the Lord, and the will of the Lord changes according to the pastimes also. So in that way, devotees assist according to the will of the Lord in different pastimes. Yeah, that's my understanding. Yes. Do you have any other answer for this? Thank you, Prabhu. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। जय जगतगुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।
these 10 topics discussed. And in general, it's the same description with maybe a minor details, a little bit different. Of course, one question is, the whole purpose of the Bhagavatam is to show how Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan, and everyone in Kali Yuga should worship him. And most of that is in the 10th canto under the topic of Ashraya. So then the question arises, why do we need the 9 other topics? Because we just need that one, Ashraya Krishna, whatever, that's the main topic. So that's a valid question, but the Bhagavatam follows the conventional form of a Purana, so therefore it will discuss these other topics as well. So as I said, other Puranas have the same topics. However, the goal in including all these topics is not just because of convention and to conform to the definition of a Mahapurana, but also to show that ultimately everything is related to Krishna. So all these other 9 topics, Sarga, Visarga, Stanam, Poshana, Uti, Manvantara, Ishanukata, Nirodha, and Mukti, they're all related to Krishna. That's how we take these topics. And so in other words, they are supporting evidence to show the supremacy of Krishna. So, for instance, we have the first topic, Sarga, which is called the primary creation of material energy. And of course, all of these, or most of the topics, all the topics except the 10th topic, are actually related to the creation and maintenance of the material world. So Krishna is rather indirectly related to these things. Krishna does not directly carry out creation or destroy the universe. So these are all done through various expansions of the Lord, which are described in the Bhagavatam itself, starting in the 3rd canto. So this first topic is Sarga, or the manifestation of the universe, the primary creation. So that primary creation is the creation executed by Mahavishnu, who is an expansion of an expansion of an expansion of Krishna. So Mahavishnu glances over Prakriti, and then Prakriti manifests Mahatattva. Mahatattva manifests Ahankara, and then Ahankara manifests the mind, and all of the senses, and the sense objects, and gross material elements, the 5 gross elements. So in this way we get all of the ingredients of the universe manifested from Prakriti. And the agent of doing this is Mahavishnu. If he does not will it to happen, it doesn't happen. So Prakriti on its own is useless. It cannot spontaneously manifest the universe. It needs the inspiration and will of the Supreme Lord behind it. So this is an essential fact that we have to accept. In other words, creation does not take place on its own. So in modern science we have the idea of a big bang, and then everything started happening after that, more or less on its own. But then, what caused the big bang? So it wasn't just it happened, according to Bhagavatam. No, the Supreme Lord willed it to happen, and therefore it happened. And without the consciousness of the Supreme Lord involved, nothing happens. So the point is that the Lord is behind the creation of the material universe, even though once it's started, we can say the laws of the universe take over, and then it seems to work on its own. But unless the impetus of the Lord is there, it doesn't start at all. Nothing happens. So that Mahavishnu is the source of the creation. But then we trace Mahavishnu back. He is called Mahashankarshan, and he is an expansion of Balaram ultimately, and Balaram is an expansion of Krishna. So then ultimately, Krishna is the final creator, but he acts through Mahavishnu in this saga. So, if we accept that Mahavishnu has great power, then we have to also accept that Krishna has even greater power, because it's through him that Mahavishnu expands and Mahavishnu glances over material energy. And in any case, no matter what form of the Lord it is, that form is completely separate and uncontaminated by material energy. There's no contact with it at all. So that's why we say that Mahavishnu glances at a distance. He's not associated closely with material energy at all. And usually the acharyas, when they talk about the iksha or the glance of the Supreme Lord over material energy, they say this means the will of the Supreme Lord. He doesn't even have to look. He just simply wills, okay, let the Prakriti manifest into Mahatattva, and then it will happen. So it's ultimately simply the Lord's will, and he doesn't have to contact material energy in any way. So the Lord is completely independent and uncontaminated by material nature, and yet he can inspire it to begin manifesting into many different forms. So that is the sarga. And visarga is the secondary creation. Once the elements are formed, manifested, the elements by themselves are quite invisible, whatever, but then they begin to combine with each other in various ways, and we get material universes formed out of those material elements. Then the Lord enters into the universe by its expansion as Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, and Garbhodakshaya Vishnu from his navel manifests Brahma, and then Brahma takes the elements and he makes planetary systems and bodies for the living entities. So that's the Visarga. So the creation of the bodies for the living entities is discussed in the 3rd and 4th canto, and the Sarga is discussed in the end of the part of the 2nd canto and in the 3rd canto. And then 4th canto again discusses some of this Visarga, the bodies of the living entities, different species of life, etc. And all this is done by Brahma. But then Brahma is usually a jiva, but he is given special power by the Lord, so he's called a guna avatar for creation. So that power is invested in Brahma by Supreme Lord. So of course we can say Vishnu, but then ultimately we say Krishna. So therefore in the Brahma Samhita, therefore we have a verse, Bhasvanya Tasma Sakalesha Nisesha Teja, that the power is given to Brahma for creation of the universe, just like the sun gives power to the sunstone so that it glows. So there's a special stone, and if you put it in the sunlight for some time, then you can put it in the shade, but then it glows and it has heat coming out of it. So that's like Brahma. You get some power from Supreme Lord, just as the sun gives power to the sunstone, so that it can act something like the sun with light and heat, but in small quantity. So that is Brahma. Brahma is like that, but he's able to manifest all of the living entities and all their complex forms by the power of the Supreme Lord. Modern scientists are amazed by the complexity of life. Now they can look at all the different life species and all the different varieties, and that in itself is complex. And then if they look at how the living bodies are constructed, with all their organs and cells and senses and nervous systems and digestive systems, etc., and go further, then look at the cells, then they look at the DNA and the RNA and all that complexity and how it's all operating. It's very, very intricate, and it operates in a very, very precise manner in order that the living entities carry on their material bodies. And all of that is done by Brahma. But then Brahma's getting his power from Supreme Lord, and ultimately from Krishna. So that's how we understand these different things, aspects of creation of the material world. And this is only material. We're dealing with material energy only. Yeah? Sarga is manifestation of Prakriti in its different forms. And then we have Visarga taking all those elements and combining them into material bodies. Yeah? And Brahman has nothing to do with creation of a jiva or anything like that. They're not created at all. Yeah? Mahavishnu injects the jivas into Prakriti. That's all he does. He doesn't create them either. So all this creation is just the creation of material bodies. And then Sthanam is the third topic. All the living entities that are created need a place to live. And each place is particular for different types of living entities. So that is called Sthana, place. So Brahma makes the places for the different types of living entities. And he makes different places for different categories of jivas. So therefore we get 14 planetary systems from Patala all the way up to Brahmaloka. And in these different places, different types of living entities are able to live and survive and propagate, etc., throughout the day and the lifetimes of Brahma. So this again is a material place. And this is largely described in the 5th canto of Bhagavatam, famous for discussing the Bhumandala and Mount Meru and the Dvipas and the Varshas of Jambudvip, etc., and then the upper planetary systems up to Brahmaloka and the lower planetary systems down to Patalaloka. So this is the Sthana, topic of Sthana. So again, a very complex system of habitats for different types of living entities, all created by Brahma, and for certain types of living entities. And it's graded according to gunas. And so by different gunas, the different living entities get placed in different lokas. So the ones at the bottom are in tamagun. The ones in the middle, like earth, are rajagun. And those svarga and above are sattva gun. So according to your karmas, etc., then you're placed in these different lokas, according to karma, according to guna. And the arrangement is made by Brahma. So that's the creation of the material aspects, the bodies and the places, etc., and the elements. After that, then we have the jivas in their particular bodies doing different activities. But the question will arise, well, how does the Lord relate? Is he completely indifferent to the jivas in the material world, and particularly the human beings and the higher living entities, those who have higher intelligence? Is he indifferent to them or not? And the answer is no. The Lord makes arrangements within the material world for the elevation of jivas. So this is one element. It's called poshana here, which means nourishing or protection. So the Lord does make arrangements so that living entities can advance within the material world. And he makes different arrangements. So one of the arrangements is bhakti. So the Lord manifests bhakti in the material world in different forms. And one of the forms of bhakti is chanting the name of the Lord. And if you chant the name of the Lord, then you get the protection of the Lord. And that is illustrated by the example of Ajamil in the 6th canto. So he chanted the name of Narayana, and he got protected from the Yamadutas. So the Lord makes arrangement for different processes in the material world, one of which is bhakti. Utaya, that's the plural for uti, and uti means literally impulse. So in the word for word here, Prabhupada translates that's the creative impetus. So there are different impulses in the material world, broadly speaking, demons and devotees. These are the two impulses, good and bad, within the material world. So the Lord makes the material world, has the places, has the living entities stuck there, but these living entities are of various natures, particularly the higher living entities. So we see at the beginning of the life of Brahma, when he creates the living entities, then he creates demons and entities in the mode of ignorance, and then he creates devatas. And so he creates all these different types of intelligent beings, but they're in different modes. So we classify some as the demoniac species and some as the devotional species. So this is a subject matter which is described, the different types of living entities and how the Lord interacts with them. The example here is given of the demonic nature of Hiranyakasipu, and then the divine nature of Prahlad. And so there's always a conflict between these two forces in the material world. Those who are siding with the Lord, those who are against the Lord. We get battles taking place. That's the uti. As well as bhakti, in general, the Lord empowers the manus to establish the laws of dharma and also the process of bhakti. And this regulates the human beings and helps them advance. So this is another way in which the Lord looks after the living entities, through the manus. So that's the subject of manvantara, which indicates the period of Manu, which is 71 yuga cycles. And through that period, Manu and his descendants implement dharma and bhakti. So this is another way in which the Lord guides the jivas. Then we have Ishanukata, stories about the Supreme Lord. So the Supreme Lord enters personally also, not just through his representatives, the manus, but he comes in avatars as well. So therefore we have Varaha and Narasimha and Rama, etc. So these stories are talked about in different cantos. Manvantara is described in quite a bit of detail in the 8th canto. And 9th canto, we got the story of Rama and a few other avatars there. And of course, the avatars are spread throughout the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th cantos. The next topic is Nirodha, which means destruction of the universe. So the Lord creates it with sarga and visarga and stana, and then the Lord destroys everything. So that's one topic as well, to show that everything is temporary. Material world is a temporary phenomena, and it goes through creation and destruction, creation, destruction, creation, destruction, repeatedly. And it's under the will of the Supreme Lord ultimately. So, of course, we have Shiva there dancing away madly and destroying the universe, but even he is, of course, an expansion of the Lord. And then we have Shankarshan also involved in the destruction of everything. Ultimately, everything merges into Mahavishnu. So by the will of Mahavishnu, everything is annihilated ultimately. So he's in charge of that. But of course, we go back to Mahavishnu, he's expansion of expansion from Krishna. So ultimately, Krishna is in charge of everything again. So the next topic is Mukti, liberation, which is of two types: impersonal liberation and then liberation to Vaikuntha or Goloka. So two types of liberation are there. So this is the jivas in the material world can get out of the material world and surpass creation and destruction and material bodies, birth and death, etc. So the arrangement for this is again made by the Supreme Lord through jnana, yoga, and bhakti, which is taught in the scriptures and taught by the devotees of the Lord. The 9th topic. And the 10th topic is called asraya, which means the shelter of everything.